Okay, today on the Remote Native Show, I'm interviewing Mary McCahon. She is a Marcom executive that was working in a small market in person and really wanted to tap the advantages and become a remote native and tap some of these top brands that are hiring their communications people straight out or into remote roles. What we're also going to be talking about today as we explore her success story and what she's doing and what she's working on, we're going to delve into a unique aspect of comms that even I had not heard about until this role. And it has to do with analyst relations with the top management companies and how they interface with Fortune 500s and Fortune 100 companies. So I want to welcome Mary here. And we're going to start, Mary, first with your journey into the remote native world and how you're feeling about this move, going from in-person or hybrid into fully remote.
Well, thank you for having me. This is really exciting. I honestly thought that remote would not be something I would love because I am such a people person and I love the energy of people around me. But it was just a really good opportunity to work for a bigger company. So where I live, it's a smaller town. I want to live here. I love it here. It's my family and friends are here. However, it kind of limits your options if you want to work for big companies. So the opportunity came up and I said, well, let me try it. Let's see how it's going a little bit during the pandemic. And then as I went along and found this job, it was 100% remote. So it wasn't even the option of having an office. And in fact, there aren't any offices where I live. So I love the part that you can travel and meet your coworkers and meet your clients and, meet other folks on the road. But your day to day, you really get a lot done sitting at your computer if you're dedicated and you have that self-control.
Right. You have to have the discipline. And
Absolutely.
you're bringing up something important too, because this is something that I impress on people, especially when they're coming to be remote native leaders, is you are going to have and should want, honestly, leadership travel. Like what percentage of your work? Because I know sometimes people want remote native and never leave their house. But as you get to certain income levels, that's not really realistic. So talk to us about the travel.
Yeah, I would say it's hard to characterize how much it is, but I would say it's probably, at least once a month would be, you should expect at least once a month. If you averaged out my year last year, which was really heavy, and this year, which has been a little bit less, it's averaging out once a month, once every 6 weeks, something will come along that you should do. And then there's also the internal networking and internal work that you do with your colleagues. So if you're nearby an office and you can do that, that's really helpful too. And that can be something that's a very, short trip, but it makes a lot of difference to have those relationships. And that's going to help you grow your career. So you want to do that too. But you definitely have to be with clients. My clients are specifically researchers and writers, and they do like the face-to-face, and they will help you and write more positively about you if they really feel that you're working hard for them. And some of that involves travel. So I would never assume that anything remote means you just stay at home. That's not how things work in this part of the world, especially in communications and marketing. However, you do have to balance with what makes sense for you.
Okay. So, and when you started, was there an expectation set where they were saying, okay, this is what the travel piece is looking like?
There was an expectation. It'll depend on the area you support and what your needs are. So I always go by this rule. If someone says it's 10% travel, it's 40% travel.
Wow.
Right? I feel like there's a chance that you're going to travel more. If there's any travel at all, unless they can really tell you exactly what it is. If you're really wanting to build your career and you want to build your work portfolio, you're going to have to go to people because a lot of people are still in the office or doing a partial office time. And so you at least will have to go to one of those locations a couple times a year. You're going to have offsites. So you're going to have team meetings that are required. There's going to be if you want to go and learn more about an association or more about other people that do the same thing you do in other businesses or other industries, you've got to go to conferences for that. So there's a lot of opportunity. I love the travel. I think it's something that you can really, plan ahead for. If you know it's coming, you can have those travel days and you can get stuff done on the plane, in between, and it can make it really fun. And it just also gives you those like ups and downs where you have people to talk to, because otherwise you're just doing the screen. And at some point, it's a little hard, for extroverts especially.
Well, okay, so tell us about the goal of analyst relations with these management consulting firms. Like, what is the goal of an organization when they work with them?
So in my industry, it's really tech related. So it's telling the analysts how you are different and you're a differentiator in tech. So I work in a space of government. And so what does my company do in the government space where they really are different than the other competitors in that space? So it's inform, it's influence, and it's just like it's called relations. Just like my previous career was public relations communications, you've got the relations part. And that part is so important that you start to know the analysts, you talk to them on a regular basis, you have meetings with them, you introduce your executives to them, you go through the whole process of basically storytelling. Like where I started was journalism and I told stories. And so now I tell stories of tech to analysts, and then you hope that they write and then also recommend that to other buyers in the market. So it's amazing that both of us had never known about this area of marketing
Never.
before, I hired higher ed on her and found this job and said, wait, this exists. It just was nothing that I had ever seen before. And I just love the way that it has this, it has a big influence and it has a big, program aspect to it, where if one of these firms rates you highly, everyone reads that and then they buy more of you. Okay. So it has a big hit, much more than like a PR hit, maybe an article or a small news publication. This is something that lasts, within the atmosphere for a while, and people are reading it and saying, okay, that's the company I want to go with. So it has a lot of influence.
So that's another part, is when you were working, as a head of communications in your previous roles, you were doing more trying to get into the periodicals, the newspapers, different types of news coverage. I mean, is it essentially almost a direct relationship as far as how the work is done? You're calling into the journalists or you're calling into the analysts. It sounds similar.
It's very similar, but the biggest difference is timing. So with journalists, editors, you're doing a morning show. You're on a morning show talking about your company. You're the spokesperson, or you're grooming your executive to be a spokesperson. That's like a small hit. Take some time, prep the person, have the hit, move on to the next thing. What the difference is with analyst relations is it's much more of a long game. So there's I'm meeting an analyst, on most analysts that I talk to are at least once a month. At least once a month, I'm having a conversation, listening to trends, hearing what they're hearing, sharing what we can share. And then it's also under NDA, which is very cool, which means it's non-disclosure. And a reporter does not have that. So don't let anyone say that there's no such thing as off the record in news, because that is absolutely true. There is no such thing as off the record. But we have an ability to be off the record with these analysts that we work with. And what that allows us to do is have long conversations and continue that relationship. And then eventually when things grow and they know more about who we are and what we're doing, then we grow into this. We have a really good publication that comes out. So while a news story may be 30 seconds on the news, or it may be, a short article, these kind of programs can be 15 to 20 pages, like, think longer reviews. Like if you're thinking of like a Harvard Business Review, it's that kind of long, in-depth
like a white paper or...
white papers, different programs. And, there's a lot of different pieces and parts to it. But the cool part is the long relationship. So you grow this relationship with the analysts. You talk about your company. They learn more about your company. They start calling you. They have research agendas. They want to talk about, all the different technologies that are out there. But then they say, hey, I'm going to call Mary because she knows about A, B, and C. And this is how I'm going to learn more about this. And then when they have a two-part relationship, they write and they also consult. So other companies will come to them for help and say, hey, I'm in the state of Illinois and I want to buy a product in this tech area. Who's the best provider? If I've done my job well, it's us.
Right.
So it's cool. It's like, it's almost like a little pivot, but it's also extremely strategic, and it doesn't have like the end. It doesn't have like, okay, I finished one thing and now I'm done. It just always is a continuous flow of information and relations there.
Okay. So let's talk about the move from traditional journalism and also, it's kind of interesting because I was just talking to a TV guy and he was saying that, TV is not as popular. People are gravitating more towards the digital media, and even TV is starting to convert more that way. He said like 60% of the news is being watched on people's telephones, in a digital format. But it's when you started your career in journalism, I know they talked to you about the trajectory as far as what your first assignment or first role would look like and the movement. And it seemed to follow pretty closely to what they said, which was kind of disturbing initially.
Yes. It's, you get hired out of your, journalism degree. You make very little money. You work very long hours.
Yeah.
You start in a very small town. And then the way that TV used to work, it was, you would start as an on-air person at a reporter level. So you're covering the stuff nobody else wants to. So the city council meetings, the things that are like, dog bites man, like small little things, right? And then eventually you can get into, so like while I moved my third city, then I got to do investigative reporting. And that was really fun. Like you can get deep into that. You can really have some, we did like a hidden camera thing on the border of, Texas and Mexico, a lot of like cool programming that you can put together. But that's like, you have to work up to that. Otherwise, you're just getting assigned stories. So, that's TV kind of went exactly in that trajectory.
It did. And then, so after I would think it was about, if I recall, 8 years that you were in traditional journalism, correct?
Yeah.
From a TV, when I say traditional, I'm meaning TV, newspaper, magazine. Yep. And then you went like what would be called in-house for a lot of different industries, meaning going straight into a company in the PR and media world and growing up through that. I don't know if you can give the listeners a little insight into what that felt like.
Yeah. So it was really an interesting transition. I had met a gentleman at my last TV job in El Paso, and he worked in Mexico. And so we were on the border, and he was someone I interviewed, and he happened to be from Ohio, and so am I. And so we were chit-chatting, and he said, have you ever thought about public relations? And I said, I love TV. This is great. Why would I want to do that? It's awesome, And a year or so later, I said, that might be something I'm interested in, where I knew that I would have to move again. So like I said, TV, you go up markets and you go small city to medium city to larger city. And I knew I would have to move again. And I was really liking where I was. So I didn't really want to do that. So he offered, hey, I'm an automotive company. We have a location in Mexico. Would you think of being the media relations person. So instead of being the person who's the reporter with the microphone, you would be doing the spokesperson role. So you would be interviewed instead of interviewing me. And I said, well, yeah, that sounds fantastic. And then that linked into the world of employee communications and linked into, working on fundraisers and doing programs where we helped people in need in the community, and just a lot of little pieces that were public relations, communications, media specialists, grant writing. It just led into a whole bunch of different pieces. And then from there, I moved on to managing employee communications for 20,000 U.S. employees at one point after about 3 years of the PR side. And then from there, I've had several different jobs that kind of just expanded that work that I did. So starting in, straight TV to media relations, and then all the different pieces that go in the communications and marketing journey, all the way up to a director of marketing communication for a county, which was an amazing opportunity, a team of 36, growing, doing everything from advertising to, social media to just about anything you can imagine. A lot of crisis communication. Thank goodness I don't do that in this job. Crisis communication is very high stress, high energy, which I have, but also love having the more structured format that I can really, like I said, build that great long-term relationship with these analysts versus what I had with the reporters.
Yeah, because that one, one of the roles, there was attacks, there was all sorts of things that were happening with the organization that, yes. It's last minute too. Like, you probably just get a call out of nowhere, right? Like,
yep. Yeah, you get a 4:00 phone call. It's 4 a.m. and there's a train just hit a person. I worked in, public transportation for years, and so you're on. What are you doing? Are you going someplace? Are you talking to reporters? Are you, you're going back and forth and working with your leaders and making sure you have all the right information, talking to the police, seeing what you can say, what you can't say.
Well, and a big part of that too was executive coaching, because yes. If, you may be the spokesperson on the story, or they may be going straight to the president, the CEO, the executive director. How is that working? Because you're essentially sometimes giving the message through another person's mouth.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Oh, very carefully, Karen. Very, very carefully. Okay. So I would say the short version of this is like time and patience. So you have to train the executives when there is not a crisis. So basically you have to convince them to take the time and talk about things before the crisis occurs, right? You just do not want to mess with someone in a amygdala hijack, like in a crisis situation, like, oh, I can't do this. I can't, you don't want that. That's not the image we want to portray.
No.
So it's a lot of like calm conversations before something bad happens. Hey, let's scenario plan. Let's figure out these. In public transportation, there were a lot of things that had happened before that I could do planning. I've always done media training myself, but there's also been times when I brought in another company where you help the executives understand, and you also have to make some really tough calls where maybe that executive is not the person you want to put on camera or to make a statement. Sometimes I would write a statement instead of having someone else do it. Because that was the safer way, and legal got involved, and you have a lot of different factors. But training executives to speak in what we call sound bites is a lot easier with people who have like a smaller speech pattern than it is when people who are very verbose, right? You got to like, okay, that's a great story. We're going to get that down to 10 seconds. They just look at you like you're crazy, but you know what? It doesn't matter because you're going to get there. So it's practice and it's narrowing things down. It's getting key messages, getting people to think in threes, like, here's your 3 key messages. This is what I want you to have always in your head. Just keep thinking that. We're going to get you to the right place.
Well, and was there a lot of coherence between external and internal, meaning you're messaging it externally, but you also need to message it to the employees? Like, are you working, with the employees to get them to also be the right deliverer of messages, like when they're out in their daily life and people are like, oh, you work at this place, this happened,
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Yes. So the rule of thumb that I've always followed is that technically an employee should not find out about anything from the media. That's a technicality. If you can avoid that happening, that's really great. Sometimes with the age of social media, I had one incident specifically that was on YouTube that someone told me about before anything ever happened, but then, it went viral and there you go. You've got 1 million views and your employees are seeing it at the same time as you. So there's nothing you can really do in that case. But in a situation where you have something that is happening that is happening that could be a problem, you want to tell your employees first, and you want to say, hey, here's the rules. Like, the only person that talks to the media is, myself or other authorized members of my team or our CEO or whoever the person is. If you have any questions, just call us. So if you get a question, you can always say, I'm really not at liberty to say, giving them some nice phrases that could kind of get them out of that situation, good things to say at a dinner party too, just to make it a little bit easier. But that is a challenging part of the job, but the internal and external is really super important because you want your employees to feel a part of anything you're doing. And especially in a crisis, if they're saying, well, would somebody do that? And why are we treating that person that way? And you kind of have to just think about all the feelings and thoughts. And you have to have a very rational, calm person who's like that lead, which was me, to understand, these are all the different pieces, parts, and we have to think about all of these. You can't just say something and be done with it. And it's also consistent, Karen. So it's like a consistent communication on one thing, keeping the employees informed, keeping the press informed, keeping, we had boards. So our governing board had to be informed. You have to keep people, informed throughout any process, whether it's planned or a crisis. And that's super key.
Now, what about the concept of measuring impact? Because on the internet, it's a little bit easier, like as far as hits and reactions and things, what in traditional media or in like what you're doing now with the analysts, how is impact measured?
It's a good question. So in the commercial side of my business, so I'm on the government side, we have a commercial side as well. There are some very specific reports that come out. If my company is mentioned in those reports, we can instantly see numbers go up. So those large reports have an instant impact. If that company in particular says that we're doing it right, there not only does that report go to a lot of people will just Google it and go for like, hey, what are they saying about this company? And it most likely will come up. So that's one way they have the influence. The other way is they speak to others, and this is the harder to measure. They speak to others on a regular basis. So again, like if, say, the state of Mississippi is wanting to implement something that the state of Connecticut did, and they heard from a consultant in this analyst firm that we had done it right, then we can actually go back and say to the customer, oh, where did you hear about that? And we can find out they came from that. So it's a long tail. It's not like, if you're a numbers person, this is very difficult for you. Like, this is not, right? This is not a typical KPI or, metric. But that's one of the ways. And it's one of those things like using, back-end sales technology. We can ask, where did the customer hear about us? if we know it's from one of these research reports, that's a great way. But the publication and then finding out from the consulting side, those are the two big winners. And then every once in a while, our conversations bring up something really important. Like we had somebody who said, I don't understand why you partner with this company. And we sat down with them and explained the partnership. And he said, wow, I feel like I could recommend you to others now from this conversation, where when I said it myself, he didn't really understand it. But when I brought the executives and they really laid it out and we gave examples of how we partnered together and how those success stories happen, you know, putting you in those shoes, he said, oh, I feel like I can recommend you now. And that's huge.
Okay. And that's that. Still, we're back to executive training.
Yes.
Yeah. Like to the communications, the stories, and
and that happens exactly the same way. You know, it's not a reporter, but it's an analyst. Right. And these are the things you can say. These are the things you can't say. I have a little trick of the trade, which I can share, which is very cool. And I have not seen anyone do it exactly this way, but with, you know, Slack and our different, you know, instant messaging tools, when I'm doing something with executives, because I used to call it shin kicking distance. My boss would be right where I could kick his or her shin and say no, but we don't have that anymore. So now we have instant message where I say, okay, I have 3 key messages. I have 1, 2, and 3. And before we get on any of those calls, every single person knows those 3 messages. This is what we want to convey during this next 45 minutes. In the next 45 minutes, I want you to do these three things, 1, 2, and 3. So I will say during that conversation in the background, hit number 2, hit number 3. It's
so you're messaging them while they're talking.
Correct. So they're, you know, we're all on video, right? We're all on video. We're, you know, we do 90% of the work is in a video now. I love it when I get to be in person and I get to actually know.
Right. Yes.
You know, and have that conversation.
You can kick the shin, right?
I can. I'm telling you, shin kicking distance is. I should patent that. So yeah, it's really cool when you have kind of a plan. So you really want to get that out. And I'm super passionate about everything I do. Like passionate in person, passionate at work. And you can have some really passionate people who care about the business. And you're like, do it. Be passionate, but be passionate and
cover the key points.
Get the key points.
Yeah. And don't gabble.
Get it. Nobody, you know, you asked me the question of tell me how you got here today. I could take 30 minutes and do that. I'm not going to. So, you know, it's like you have to just kind of tighten it. I always say, can we tighten that up a little bit? We'll start with 3 paragraphs and we get down to 3 sentences. So as long as those people that you're talking to are getting those main points at the end, you're doing well. And there are ways to do that, you know, in a professional manner where you just communicate beforehand with people. This is what's going to happen. This is the channel that is open. This is where I'm telling you, like, here's how much time we have. Here's where we're going. Here's who's talking next. You know, making sure that everything is very structured. And I like to be a little bit like looser about having a lot of Q&A. It doesn't have to be like such a presentation all the time. But then again, if you're dealing with government, sometimes it does. So it just depends. And that, I guess that brings up target audience. I haven't talked about that, like really knowing who your audience is. So who is your analyst speaking to and what resonates with them? What's important to them? The old WIFM, what's in it for me? If you're not telling the people what's going to be helpful for them in buying technology from my company or another company, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you came from. It doesn't matter your background. It doesn't matter how much you think we have the best product. Is it actually doing what it needs to do for citizens in government case? You really have to be careful and you have to narrow down and understand your targets.
So, I mean, one of the things that I'm hearing here is it's a lot of indirect influencing.
Yes.
you're not reporting directly to these people or whatever, but you're influencing this message through other people's mouths, which I think is probably one of the more fascinating things about this type of work. And it has almost a coaching aspect to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like any sort of marketing communication career, you really do have to have that, and you have to have the presence that people will take your coaching. So, and that's learned. I mean, I'm not going to say I figured it out the first time. It's taken many years, but over my career, I've been able to say, this is what's worked for me before. This is how I feel we can best address this issue. And then, hey, I'm learning a new industry, right? I'm a year and a half into this job. Like, learn and just listen and see what people have to tell you about the different ways that your company works, because each company is different too. But you have to build that trust, and, building that trust with the leaders, showing that you can actually, put something together that makes sense. And sometimes they're very hesitant, because we do have that non-disclosure with the analysts, to say anything that we wouldn't say externally. We keep saying they're here to help us. Like, they have a consulting aspect to us as well. And so we have to coach them that it's okay to say things you can't say, which is a very strange thing, right?
Right.
But it is. I spent my first 20 years of my career coaching people never to say anything you can't say. So now we're saying, don't talk about this externally, but it's okay because they're under non-disclosure with us. It's okay. So you're building trust, you're earning the trust, you're, showing that you have that strong backbone, you have the ability to lead a conversation, that what the analysts are interested in, that you've done your homework. There's just a lot of that. Yeah, that coaching aspect is, I hope will be a part of my career for the rest of my life, because I love that part when you have that aha moment. And I did have one, this is many years ago. I don't know if I've ever told you this story, but when I worked for a public transportation agency, and we had a vice president come to town, and we didn't have an event coordinator. That wasn't a job. I was the public relations director. So I go, I got it. So I do the whole event, right? We have the vice president of the United States at the time. We've got Secret Service. We have every police department. We have a running train system and bus system and roads that all had to be shut down for, before and after the event. And my boss, the CEO, after the event, he looked at me and he said, I had no idea what it took to make that happen, and you did it. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yes, it was an insane amount of work, but it's that you're coaching and you're teaching people, okay, this is how we do an event. This is how the press works. This is how we get the news out to employees. This is how, you work with Secret Service. Like, you're learning all these things. I mean, I never worked with Secret Service before, no. But you learn along the way. And it's also why it's exciting. It's why this is a cool career, because, I used to interview people for 8 years. I got to interview interesting people. Like, I interviewed former President Bush, that was cool. I got to see some really great stuff, meet some celebrities along the way, learn how to wrestle a snake. I mean, come on, all the crazy things that, rode in a rodeo. Like, come on, all the crazy things. You're like, why would I ever do that? So you learn. And all of this to say, along the way, you learn things, and then hopefully you can help others as well.
Well, yeah, this also reminds me, and I don't know how, there's two things I was going to ask about. One is, how important is it still now, many years later, the traditional journalistic start that you had? Like, do they still want to see it?
You know what? I think that it comes back to this storytelling. Yeah. It was funny. There was a moment at one of my jobs about 5 to 7 years ago, where my communications leader had said, we really need to just start talking about public relations in a more journalistic way. And basically what that was storytelling. And I go, this is how my entire life has been structured, Karen. I have always been a storyteller. Whether it's a story that's a small TV story, whether it's like life with my friends and my family, whatever it is. Well, storytelling is how you get to an analyst. I'm going to tell you a story of how this state used our technology to do this for its citizens. And from that story, they can extricate whatever they need. And so I am not a tech person. I am talking more in strategy and programs, and then I bring in the experts for tech. So if they want to dive deep into a tech, that's not what we do. But what we do is we bring them a story. So I think it's incredibly important, like storytelling, and then also deadlines. Like talk about remote, back to the, like, hey, here we're in this remote situation. Having a deadline every single day as a reporter is a huge lesson, because I can have programs that are 6 months away, and I need to set myself deadlines along the way and say, okay, this is coming up in 6 months. I'm not just going to wait. I need to have a deadline that's like my 4 month, my 1 month, make sure that I have that, and prioritizing and organizing and understanding deadlines is huge, because I don't want to ever miss a deadline. And when you're a reporter, you cannot miss a deadline. It is not acceptable. So when you get into the corporate world, and I'll just give you one quick example. I actually had my very first assignment. I said, okay, they said, I want you to write this press release. And I said, great. When do you want it? They said, well, we start the review process next month. And I said, wait, next month? I have a month, right? That's like, what's the review process? So yeah, it was totally like foreign to me that could have even possibly happened. And those types of, like my original, that very first press release took almost 8 weeks to get approved. Now I wrote it in like 5 minutes because that's how I did things, right? And so changing the style from journalism to corporate was quite an adventure, but also really exciting. And then add in, that was also in Spanish. So add in a different language, that adds some momentum to the story too. But love that opportunity to kind of say, okay, I know how to manage my time in terms of urgent deadlines. So let's figure out the best way. And in government, there's a different speed too. So going from journalism to corporate to government, also different speed. So you just have to learn and adjust. It's not going to be the same way everywhere. And we have a saying like, one state, one state. There's not like all the states are not the same for my business currently. And so you really do have to know and understand each specific situation to make it work.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I know at one time, if I recall from your background, there was kind of like branded sponsorships like NASCAR or something, Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that? And then also like how that type of work comes into play with what you're doing. I mean, it's probably coming down to storytelling. I'm imagining is where this is going, but
yeah,
just talk a little bit about that type of work, because it seems related to this, the whole concept of being seen and more impressions and getting out there. But if you could speak on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I know what you're talking about. We sponsored race car driver in the Indy Racing League. And it was one of those projects that came to me. They said, hey, Mary, you've done TV. What do you think would get us on the news? And that's kind of how it started. And how it evolved was we brought the race car and the race car driver to Mexico to 20,000 employees so they could see the race car and see the driver and meet him and have this feeling of being involved with our sponsorship. So that became the internal communication side. We got the press, we, let people know about it. We, there's a big racing community. So it's like, I've never really done sports media, but, that whole field is out there too. That's cool. But I think then there's probably another one too, where I had bus advertising that was in my purview. And so we would work through like, what could we put on there? So I went to the news station. I was like, what can we do? Can I get you on our buses? And they were like, what would that entail? And I said, well, I'm going to need some ads. So can we trade? Can we make it? It's just thinking creatively and kind of coming up with different ideas. And I think expanding. So somebody and then maybe the point is here that somebody comes to you with one question and you go, well, what if I can do the media part, but what if we included our employees? And what if we did a fundraiser too? I forgot about that. We did that fundraiser that went with that. So he came down to Mexico and he helped us, donate to building more schools or whatever the case was. So you kind of think about all the different things you can do. And then you say, how can I get people to be engaged? So how do I cut through the noise? And it's very similar. Yes. Right now we have I'm in a very different company, a very different brand. And there's just a lot of moving parts to work through, but you are still cutting through the noise. What makes it different? What makes it exciting? And I would say the biggest compliment I have received in recent years was I just went to an event in California, and an analyst I've only seen on Zoom throughout the year and a half that I've been at this job. He said, I recognized you by your voice walking down the stairs because you were laughing. And that is what he knew, that he heard my voice and he knows I'm laughing and we have a great conversation. We talk all the time. I, know about his family and know about his life. Wow. And he said, when I heard you laughing and your voice coming, I knew exactly, because I said, do you look the same on camera as you do in person? Not really, So I said, how did you know it was me? It was your laugh. He was like, and he proceeded to tell my boss, like, it's just so fun to work with Mary. And so hopefully fun is also translating to, quality work.
Yeah.
Getting done.
Right.
But I mean, why not? We're at work more than we are with our families. Like, why not make it fun? So that's what I try to do.
So what recommendations would you have? I mean, to me, I already have a feeling based on what you're saying for formal communications, the media relations, the public relations, analyst relations, more not necessarily on the digital marketing side or digital comms.
Yeah.
What are you? I guess we're asking growing a remote career. It still feels to me, Mary, that a traditional in-person start is a good way to start.
Yes.
And then, like, it just seems like it all of the core things are built into your DNA from working in the news, and it's still desirable out there. And then switch into a remote. Like, don't try and start your comms career remote. That's the feel I get, unless it's digital marketing, which is a whole nother animal, really.
Yeah, I feel like it's true. I believe that I ended up with a lot of skills from being in person and learning from others. So having that ability to learn from more seasoned professionals, to watch, to listen in different meetings, to, you cannot come out of college or come into anything in a new job as a very young person and most likely be taken seriously, because what you learn in school is not really where you're getting, you're cutting your teeth and getting those skills. So it feels like having that in person was really great. And like I said at the beginning, when I got sent home from a previous employer to work at home from COVID, I thought it was going to be the worst thing ever, because I had no desire to be away from my friends, like that collegial part. And hey, I want to brainstorm. I have this problem. How do I fix it? Other really great professionals, right? But it's different now at a different age and a different type part of your career where I think it's better. So yeah, I wouldn't trade. I mean, in journalism, there's no way out of it. You need to be there. You need to be at the TV station. You need to be right. But yeah, I would say if someone says, hey, you've got to come in for your first job 3 days a week, you're pretty lucky, because that's like unheard of in the olden days. But I think you do get a lot of benefit from your colleagues and coworkers. And what you have to do in this Zoom environment is really cultivate that. So one of the things I do is I do set up meetings with other people who I normally would have just walked by in the hall. Like, you have to be strategic and thoughtful to do that, because you would literally, the last place I worked, I had this huge hallway, and I would run to the restroom and I'd see 10 different people, and we'd solve all the world's problems in that 10, those 10 people. But when you have a remote work, you have to really schedule your time. You have to be careful, and you have to think strategically about who do I need to know? Who can help me? Who can I help? Who would be able to inform me to make better decisions? You've got to think about all that stuff.
Okay, that's awesome advice. And well, I think that's pretty much wrapping up right now on everything. And I mean, I'm obviously so excited about your ability to move remote and maintain your executive presence and work with senior leadership and maintain these relationships, which, I mean, it's very collaborative, your type of work. It's not just sitting at your desk.
No, there is no.
And I was going to say, TV prepared you for the Zoom world, or for the video for Teams, right?
It did. Absolutely, right. I love it. It's like, oh, this feels very familiar. I'm right.
Yeah, exactly. Like, wait, I started here. That's right. I mean, like right now, my eye contact is on the camera, the positioning, the lighting, the sound, everything. It was just literally built into your DNA from the very beginning. So I think that's, I want everybody to be remote native, and in digital marketing, like I said, it can be a totally different animal, but with traditional comms and even some marketing, this I think is an important start for people to consider.
Yes. And there's hand-holding involved too. You do need to be there to support people, and sometimes that happens better in the beginning together.
Yes. Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I'm absolutely loving it. I think this is fantastic, and I'm excited. If I could help anybody, I'd be happy to do it. Can always connect with me on LinkedIn and talk more about career, or any questions you have. I love helping other people, and it's just nice to be out there. And of course, was so grateful to you for finding this great role for me that we didn't know about, that we love so much.
This was the same thing we keep telling people. We're like, trust the process, because the process is this. The analyst relations does not really match necessarily what you're doing, and your employer had figured out that this really is a PR. This needs a media person in it because it's the same skill set. Mm-hmm. But it's titled terrible. Like, when I think of analyst relationships, I'm not thinking of PR. So it was the keyword grab. It's what we do to find the roles, and it delivered here. Like,
it did.
Yes. So
absolutely.
We still trust the process too. We ask our candidates to trust the process. We have a process that we have to trust that consistently is delivering results for the candidate. So we're thrilled for your success. And as Mary said, if you would like to reach out to her, her name's on here, and we can link up to the LinkedIn on the podcast notes.
So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Bye.